Hello, thank you again for watching. Today I just wanted to do a video a bit about the relationship that people have with food, me in particular. I think that in North America especially, because of sort of the post-war attitudes and sort of a lot of um, cultural things that come with all the immigrant families that have come to Canada and the United States particularly, there's always this idea that sort of food is of mass importance, especially from people who would have come from sort of war-torn places or places where there was food scarcities at some point in their lives or in their parents' lives. And so there's been this idea instilled in like current generations that people are always worried about, have you eaten enough food? And in North America, I don't think there's any problem with that in most places. I would say it's the opposite problem where people are eating too much food or the wrong foods, and like this morbid obesity that's sort of everywhere is like a huge health problem. And I mean, I'm sure like a lot of you out there, you've got like the grandma or the aunt or whatever that's always constantly like, oh my god, did you eat enough? Have more, have more, have more. And they're just like constantly worried that you're not eating enough food. And I think this is just like a historical thing that has come down through all the reasons that I mentioned just now. So with that, I just wanted to talk about sort of my like current relationship with food, how it's changed. I think definitely in the past I would have been one of those people who get very hangry, hungry, angry. At the end of the day, you haven't eaten in a few hours, you had like a small lunch, maybe a breakfast, and it's like 6, 7 o'clock at night and you still haven't had dinner, and you're just like, oh my god, I'm so hungry, I'm gonna kill somebody, and you're just like not in a very pleasant mind space. So I would definitely say I did a few years of that, especially at times where I wasn't having like very good breakfast. Breakfast is really important. Anyways, I've kind of switched it now. I'm really trying to have a really good breakfast, a good lunch, and like dinner is sort of like whatever. Like, if you're in a position where you can eat 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 times a day, having enough food is not a problem for you. And I think this is the case for most people in North America, Canada, US, Mexico. Yeah, food shortage isn't the issue. I think it's just food quality and the types of food that people are consuming. And also, that's all backed up by this idea that there's a shortage and that you need to consume as much as you can whenever possible, because maybe in a few hours it might be like 3, 4, 5, 6 hours before you can eat again. And that's a real concern. I mean, if you have like some sort of medical condition like diabetes or something like that, then you do actually need these kinds of things. If you have like a blood sugar drop or whatever, you need certain sugars just to prevent you from passing out. But barring all that, you really don't need to eat as often and as much as I think people do. So I just kind of wanted to talk about that. I definitely had sort of like an unhealthy relationship with food for a little while there. I wouldn't say the majority of my life. Most of my life I've been pretty healthy, usually at least half of the time eating like pretty good things. I grew up in a very healthy, health conscious sort of environment for the most part. So it wasn't a huge learning curve for me to learn about what are the appropriate things that you should be eating, when, and what quantity. It's definitely something that I've looked into more recently as I've been like getting more interested in my own health. And another thing with that, I mean, you can have a personal trainer, you can have a nutritionist, but at the end of the day, your personal health is your responsibility. You can get advice from your doctors or whatever, but it's not their job to make sure that you are making good choices in your life, and you have to take responsibility for that. So that's a big part of it. I just wanted to briefly talk about a book that I had read. It was massively popular 50 or 60 years ago when it came out, by Herman Hesse. I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly. but it's Siddhartha, and it's basically a story of a guy that's looking for spirituality, goes on a journey, you know, the classic sort of like Buddhist sort of tale where he's like looking for spiritual enlightenment and has all sorts of discoveries and learnings about things, and then applying that to his personal life and getting lessons here and there. And it was a book that I found randomly somewhere on one of my journeys and started reading it and found it really interesting. Very dense though, because it is very like, it's not, I mean, I guess it technically is a fiction, but there's a lot of very like concrete spiritual ideas when you look into it. Herman Hesse, he really did a lot of research into the book, and I think it's a really good eye-opener if you don't know much about sort of Eastern religious philosophies, to kind of get into the ideas, the very basic ideas of sort of like Buddhism. And there's a quote in there that I wanted to bring up, which is, "I can think, I can wait, I can fast." And this is the main character, and he's talking, and he says it a few times in the book, and it's very poignant because in the beginning of his journey, he's really just looking to sort of abandon his life as he knows it, to go on the spiritual journey, really just focusing on meditating, fasting, thinking about higher level things, and just practicing patience. And I think all three of these things, you know, really searching spiritually or intellectually for truths, being patient, and being willing to fast. These are all three really sort of key things that I think could help a lot of people. Now, I don't want to promote like any sort of weird people thinking that I'm saying like you should have an eating disorder or anything like that. But what I'm saying is like the mindset that we have, where, you know, any chance that you have, even if you feel a little bit hungry, you need to immediately start eating whatever you can find. And I think this is when people get into this bad habit of going to fast food places or getting a bag of greasy, salty chips with no nutritional value, or candy or something like that. When they start to feel hungry, they think, well, I've been hungry for 3.5 minutes, so I better get some food. But the reality is you can go days without food and the human body survives. It's just this cultural idea that we need to eat like 3 or 4 times a day, like huge big meals, and that is just not necessary. Definitely it's good to have water, like hydration is something that you want to do every day, and eating is something you want to do every day, but like having this urgency about it, I think is just like a mindset shift. I really like this quote: whenever I'm starting to feel hangry and I haven't eaten in a while and I don't see any healthy options around, I really just try to think like, okay, this is going to be just another sort of spiritual lesson about patience, because patience is not something I'm very good at. So just realizing like, you know what, it's probably only going to be 30 minutes, maybe 1 hour, maybe 2 hours before I can really get some nutritious food. And I really just try to accept that and bring it into my own life. So yeah, hopefully that rings true to you in some sense. If not, read that book. It's really good. Yeah. Otherwise, peace.